Hello, ULF. This is Chairman Jack. I'm here with.
I'm Stick Rick. I'm also a member of the OLF ML.
Yeah. So this is your first video, right?
Yep.
All
And
right.
I am extremely excited.
Oh, good to hear. So what we're going to talk about is the two Koreas. We're going to give basically a very small, brief window into what's going on for a possibility of us doing future videos on it. If you guys would like that, you have the basic like and comment if you guys want more like Korea based or something like that content, or just like comment what you guys want in the script or in the comment section. So to give like a brief look at why the Korean Peninsula is like the way it is if you look at it, there used to be one united Korea. It was the People's Republic of Korea, and it was a united socialist government. And very similar to what happened in Vietnam, if free elections were to be held, the communists were most likely going to win. The U.S. didn't want that, and so they divided the peninsula in half. Seeing this, the USSR also came in order to ensure the entire peninsula would not fall to the United States, because there was actually a massive history of the USSR and Korea, and the USSR even contemplating invading Korea in order to liberate it from the Imperial Japanese in the 20s, and actually creating Korea into an autonomous region of the Russian Federative Republic. That was actually considered for a while. So the Soviet Union was mainly trying to keep the People's Republic of Korea alive, thusly splitting at the parallel. But so what happened was, after this, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the DPRK, was founded, and it believes itself is in the legacy of the People's Republic of Korea. It views itself as a legitimate government. Why you occasionally see things about them calling themselves the legitimate government of Korea. Because if you look at it, they are. They are the legitimate government of Korea. And if you look at it on the opposite end, South Korea, as much propaganda that you hear about North Korea, about them being extremely authoritarian, killing journalists, the families running everything, the same is actually true in the South. The South is widely an oligarchy. A select number of families hold power, and only families that have wealth, and not even wealth in the capitalist sense that, the bourgeoisie control the state. I mean wealth as in a select number of oligarchs, like a couple families, have power in the South. And so it is just a very monstrous republic that it was a military dictatorship until 87, and until 79. The North actually had a higher standard of living than the South. Only until mass Western investment came in did the South start to become some luxury state that it's not considered to be. But that's like the overview to look at it, and we'll dive deeper actually right now with a couple of different parts about why the Koreas are the way they are. Rick, you have anything?
I mean, well, North Korea its economy has been completely decimated by its isolation in the world. It's a complete lack of trade from basically the entire West. They almost rely solely on China for trade. So
exactly, because the Westerners mainly see it as you can either follow our sanctions and not trade with Koreans and trade with all of the West, or you can trade with Korea. Nobody wants to make that bet. And only when you have enough economic power, like China does, they can trade with both and don't have to actually worry about what the Americans say or try to do. I think the biggest thing that a lot of people don't realize is they blame the Koreans for the situation they are in, and not the capitalists who push them into this situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue that a lot of people need to face and need to realize is that the Koreas is not an isolated situation of economic disparity due to a nation having independence and not wanting to be a Western puppet. This is seen widely across the world, whether you look at Cuba, whether you looked at China until late Mao. It is a massively oppressive time that's very hard for these nations to get out of.
Yeah, and even looking at their lack of autonomy, that's forced upon them by the West. They still do considerably well considering their circumstances. I mean, Cuba even now, they still have a higher standard of living than Americans. They still have fewer starvation related deaths than Americans and malnutrition related deaths. So even though their situation is very dire, they're still sort of managing to.
Oh no, I get you. What I find
Yeah.
very funny about that too is that Cuba, even though it's considered a backwards, as probably Donald Trump would put it, a shithole, is that they have a higher literacy rate than the United States. They have a 99.7% literacy rate. Well, if you look at America, the stats that exist right now is roughly 10% of the population cannot read or do math beyond a third grade level. That is the definition of literacy in the United States. So, more people are illiterate in the United States than they are in Cuba. For a country that is considered a third world shithole, has ended mother-to-child HIV transmission, has developed cures for lung cancer and skin cancer, and is working on more cures for cancer. Not cures per se, like the vaccinations, but cures as in medicines you can take that will end your cancer, which is completely unimaginable in the West, unless they would be sold at exorbitant prices that nobody could afford, which they are. In America, these same pills cost $5,000 per pill. In Cuba, it's roughly $5. It is, and that is even subsidized by the government. So I think a lot of people demonize these nations as even from a leftist perspective. They demonize them as authoritarian. They demonize them as not truly being leftist or progressive. They demonize them for quote unquote torturing their people, and a lot of it is what the West is pushing on people to believe. Because if you actually, why these nations are so demonized, North Korea, Cuba, Iran, even to a degree, even though I'm not saying Iran is a progressive or socialist state, but should still be supported out of anti-imperialism. But what I am saying is that all these nations are demonized so they can be invaded. All of these nations have these lies taught against them so they can be overtaken and destroyed. Because if you can make the entire population hate a country, you can invade it. Why did we lose in Vietnam? Because the people said, why am I dying in jungle when the Vietnamese person has never hurt me? If you make it so you can tell the lie that the North Koreans or the Iranians or the Cubans are coming for you, then you can push your people towards war and push your people to overthrowing these nations. And that is exactly what the United States has done. And that is exactly what the United States will continue to do. So I think every single person needs to take these things that they hear about these various third world countries or these various like anti-American countries with a massive grain of salt from every perspective, whether they be leftist or whatever. Because so many people eat up this propaganda because that's what's fed to them without realizing any other parts to it.
Yeah, it's funny, and like the Western powers seem to sort of feed us this heroic narrative that we're going in to save the people of these countries from their tyrannical governments, and
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like it's become such a unanimous lie in our country that it's sort of just become completely accepted by people on almost every side of the aisle. You know, like the
Mm-hmm.
left in America doesn't really defend North Korea, except when you go to the most radical corners of it, because I mean, even some other communists won't defend North Korea because, they've been that lie of North Korea being completely tyrannical, it doing everything it does just purely out of self-interest. It's something that's completely accepted, and that lie is something that the left doesn't want to associate itself with.
Exactly. I think a lot of people, whether they be anarchists or sock Dems, even if you want to consider them leftists, even though many don't, understandable. But really, anyone of a perspective that isn't normally based around anti-imperialism or um based around like Marxism, Leninism, will always tend to critique these nations and act as if they are evil, when if you're not actually giving it any true analysis, that these people are not suffering because their tyrannical leader wants to starve them out, because there's no logic to that. There's no logic to these lies that are told. Whether if you look at the lies that were told last year about how he like murdered one of his members of his quote unquote harem, even though she showed up a week later at the Olympics. Actually, I don't even know. I think the lie was told that she was in a harem, but I think it might have been like his wife that said that the media said that she was dead. And then, oh, she showed up. Actually, no, wait. I'm entirely wrong. It was his sister. Said his sister was dead. Sister shows up at the Olympics. Said his great uncle was dead. Showed up and gave a big press conference. They tell these lies over and over and over again, only to be proven wrong. But people keep buying it because that is the lie that they are told in their media, and they accept that lie. Because it's so easy to demonize a country. It is very easy. But what's hard is actually trying to gain knowledge about a nation and not just taking it at face value on what CNN or Now This or whoever tells you these lies. Nobody wants to be genuinely told what is happening beyond a surface level, because so many of these people don't want that. They don't want their objective narratives in their head being tried or being fought against. They just continue to live backing this U.S. propaganda because it doesn't challenge their narrative.
Yeah, and another part of just Americans being so conditioned to believing all these lies about communist or progressive countries, it's mostly like a question of comfort, because the whole idea that you've been lied to about nearly every military intervention of like the past 70 years, it's hard for most people to accept, and it's hard for most people feel comfortable with, because then they feel that they're part of the out group.
Exactly. What a lot of people don't want to question is that they are a part of the ongoing system that's in place. Nobody wants to feel as if they are a part of the tyrannical nation that is the United States and back it, even though the most progressive people around, even Bernie Sanders or people like that are in the mainstream considered massive progressives. Bernie Sanders has agitated for more bombings against Palestinians. He has agitated for these imperialist wars. And if you actually look at it, even the most progressive of people don't actually have a good anti-imperialist line. The only people, funny enough, within mainstream that you see actually have like an anti-imperialist line are the most hardcore of libertarians, and that isn't even due to them actually caring about anti-imperialism. It's about them caring about the interests of the United States and thinking that they'd be better served at the home front rather than supporting war, which I find entirely hilarious. That out of all that, some random fucking whack job in a shed can actually understand that the U.S. does what it does based out of greed, rather than it does what it does because it cares about like people in the third world and wants to liberate their countries, or whatever thing that the U.S. wants to tell itself, that they're doing things because they actually truly care about people and aren't just doing it because they want to,
just out of self-interest.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody wants to admit that. Nobody wants to be fine with that. And nobody wants to accept that because we think the United States is some wholly good country. And even when it does bad because it needs to, I don't even know, help these people. And just some bad things got in the way. It's
Yeah,
so.
and
No, sorry, continue.
no, it's good. And like just to look into just how deeply entrenched our culture is in, Red Scare tactics and anti-communism. You have, a guy like you mentioned earlier, Bernie Sanders, who sort of the mainstream centrist neoliberal media is painted as this like patron saint of the left. But even him, when Nicolas Maduro complimented him at one point, I forget what was over. Bernie Sanders called him something like a filthy commie. Not, and I don't think it was something that blunt, but it was like filthy communist or something like that. And it's,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just funny because even a nation like Venezuela that isn't even communist, it's just a progressive left wing country that's been destroyed by our imperialism. Even that is too far less of the dial for like mainstream liberal politicians to get behind.
I mean, exactly. No matter what it takes, no nation will be openly fine. Sorry, excuse me. No capitalist nation will be openly fine with any progressive force that rivals the United States. Why have all these nations over the past decades in Latin America and around the world been overthrown? Well, they reject U.S. hegemony. So they are overthrown and they are toppled. To act as if the United States truly cares about third world countries is to be ignorant to what the U.S. has done to these countries and what the U.S. continues to do and what the U.S. continues to destroy in all of these nations. So, I don't know. I think it's a big piece that needs to be recognized more and that a lot of people don't truly realize. Overall, to get back to the Korean situation that we were talking about earlier, is the Korean situation is very, if you actually truly look at it, it should be more one-sided than it actually is because of the fact that the South, it has and still is a rather brutal oligarchic country and is only praised because of the demonization compared to North and South Korea. And by mere comparison, they're considered better, even though they're massively authoritarian, they're racist, and these nations are a lot of Koreans view mixed people, just like the Japanese, as lesser. They view black people as lesser. I've heard numerous stories from a student that I had classes with who is half Taiwanese and is half African, who lived in Korea, and basically what happened was she would be given racial slurs. She would basically, what I was also told, and funny enough, we did a group project about U.S. imperialism, but what I was also told was about how you basically pay for the grade that you get. And so you get the best after you have class. You basically have a thing called crunch time where you study and study and study and study for hours. And unless you have a good tutor, you're not going to do that well. And a lot of people can't afford the best tutors. So actually around exam time, they have to close off the upper parts of these buildings to make sure these kids won't kill themselves. Like, it's extremely brutal on how the South Korean government and its culture acts. And to act as if all these bad things in the Korean Peninsula don't exist because it's compared to the DPRK and all the propaganda that's given to it is completely irrational and is almost, in a phrase, irresponsible to act as if just because while this nation that you don't like is doing something, that they're automatically the nation next door is completely fine with whatever it does. I think it is both irresponsible and irrational to do such, even on top of the fact that a lot of this things that you hear about the DPRK is blatant propaganda, while the things that you hear about the South have been proven with time and proven with history.
Yeah, and it's funny how our media sort of spins these narratives about that get us to support just racist states just because they get us to turn on their enemies who are nowhere near as bad as they are, but are still, they're able to convince us that, they're completely tyrannical. As with Israel, as with North Korea, South Korea only accepts 2.5% of refugees to their country, since I think 95 or 94. It's because of, their reaction to people of other ethnicities migrating to their country is completely hostile. I read something a couple days ago about how there were a couple hundred Yemenis who are seeking refuge in South Korea, and over 500,000 of South Koreans petitioned the president to turn them away. And it's just it's sort of it's sort of an even more toxic culture towards refugees in America because it's completely ethnocentric.
Yeah, exactly. They're both ethnically homogenous, especially because the South never really had much mixing with Chinese. So they're ethnically homogenous, and they also hold an overall xenophobic culture where they don't want to mix their cultures, and are very much against. I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation of this, miscegenation, or the mixing of races / ethnicities, and that massively exists in these cultures. And I think the biggest problem is that it just turned and battered the eye and acting as if these things don't exist. I think the overall thing is that a lot of more people need to do research and look into how both Korean governments exist beyond just what the West says and beyond what is just looked at by one perspective. I think a lot of these problems could easily be faded away if people just move beyond listening to, Fox News, CNN, Watch Now, all these biased American media sources. If you look beyond the American media, you can find a lot better things that will actually truly instruct you. But will truly teach you about what is going on in these situations, why they exist the way they do.
Yeah, I think it's a shame how with sort of, I guess, liberal media, or not necessarily the media, but just with sort of liberal folks here in America, it's sort of like we've sort of learned to treat ethnic homogeny as a sign of success for a nation. You always hear about how all these Scandinavian countries are so successful because they have they're
ethnic homogeny.
Yeah, they're ethnically homogenous, and it kind of makes sense that those would be the more successful ones than when the ones that really are progressive and are socialist countries that support equality for all its people are the ones that we take down and try to sabotage in every way possible, and that we stage dozens of coups against.
That's a great take, and I really like that, because if you look at it, how people say universal healthcare can exist in America, because when you even bring up the Scandinavian countries or any country like Canada or any country that has universal healthcare, not saying these nations are progressive or even leftist by any means, but if you look at it, a lot of people say, oh, universal healthcare can't happen in America because these nations are ethnically homogenous, and we're not. Acting as if ethnic homogeny is the only way for our nation's success.
Yeah, it's just veiled racism.
Exactly.
Without much to back it up at all,
Exactly. Yeah. I fully agree with that. I think you are on target exactly. With, a lot of it is just, thinly veiled racism, acting as if these people that say these things are just, oh, no, these are the facts behind it. And, use the 13% of the population, 50% of the crime stat. That's just completely just fucking dumb. and without real material basis. So I think the biggest part of it that needs to be confronted and realized is just the overall propaganda that exists, and how even the United States prizes ethnic homogeneity and prizes the overall, whiteness, and prizes anything that reminds us of the Anglo Christian tradition. Anything
Yeah.
that puts value towards that is instantaneously accepted and viewed as good and viewed as prosperous and all of that. So I think that's the biggest reason why like South Korea, so many people latch onto it, both because of like the Orientalism that exists in the United States, whether you want to call them weebs or Korea boos or whatever you want to call these people that access over the Far East. They still just are in the very similar line of being Orientalism and prizing, like nearly fetishizing the Far East. And that's, I think, the biggest reason why or not the biggest reason, but it's a reason why a lot of people don't want to criticize the South or criticize a lot of the Far East, is mainly due to this Orientalism and viewing them as, the near Anglo people of color. These people
Yeah.
are excellent. And when
Yeah, I
people
agree.
rival that narrative, they're viewed as evil. See China, see the North Koreans, see the Vietnamese, Laotians, etc. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. If you guys want us to make more content based around like Korea, leave a like and comment that, because this was really just like a really brief analysis. So if you want us to continue this in the future, just let us know. If you guys want us to make really any video in particular, just leave a comment down below, because we look at all these comments. If you guys haven't noticed, we look and we reply to all of these, and we really care about your guys' opinion, because this channel exists for everyone watching. So if you guys want a certain video made, just leave a comment and we'll look at it and we'll consider it. We'll probably make it into a video. So remember, and if you guys also want more content based around Korea, make sure you like the video. And if you like our content overall, the basic like, comment, subscribe stuff. So thank you all so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let us know if you did. And thank you so much. I hope you guys have a good day. This has been Chairman Jack, and
Stick Rick.
so I hope you guys enjoyed it. You guys have a good one.